Newsroom, and The Body. This session explores crime through journalism, investigation, science, and institutional memory. Please welcome Biman Nath, who has come back to Bangalore for this festival, and Sunil Nair from our own city in conversation with Dipti Nair. Give them a big round of applause.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this panel, What Gets Buried. I'm Dipti, and welcome Biman and Sunil. Before we start, I have this interesting sort of anecdote involving one of my favorite crime writers, Ruth Rendell. Before she became a celebrated crime writer, she used to be a journalist. And she was sent to cover an event. I think it was a tennis club dinner, and she didn't attend that, but she wrote about it. And it so happened that the after dinner speaker, he dropped dead in the middle of his speech. So, of course, she was asked to leave and said, and so a celebrated crime writer, she was undone by a real life death. And what an literary irony that, of course, we are all literary fiction, crime fiction is richer to have for that because, of course, after a few years, she went on to start writing, and she wrote bad novels, and then, of course, she came up with this. So, to begin on this, the case in point, to start with the case in point, Biman, I'll start with you. You are an astrophysicist, right? You are a scientist. You deal with facts, data, and peer reviews, etc. The kind of research that you do. How did you stumble upon fiction? This is your third book. This is your third book, The Whistleblower's Wife.
Yeah.
And how did you stumble on fiction?
First two books. First of all, thanks to the organizers for inviting me here, and and I'm really glad to be with Sunil, you. So this is my third. Where the first two novels were historical novels. I sort of got tired of writing about the past, so I wanted to think about something in contemporary world. And the milieu that I have been around, and I've been in academia for, it's a long career. I was in Raman Research Institute for almost 29 years. And before that, I worked in other continents also. So I wanted to, but if your question is like, why fiction as a scientist? Well, if I say that, I don't see my work as a scientist and as a fiction writer being very different. It may surprise you, but there's this famous quote by Einstein, right? In the imagination is more important than knowledge. I mean, as a scientist, I think you have to be imaginative. We don't actually think like that. Although we deal with facts, but so what do we do? I mean, as a theoretical astrophysicist, I have data, and I try to build a model where that can explain the observations, right? And the model is a model. It's a story. It's a mental picture that I have. It may or may not be the truth. Sometimes when the model works fine, we think that, oh, we have found the truth and all that. But that's not really true. One should not have this. One should shed that hubris, because the science progresses and the model can be replaced by some better model. So what you have is a best approximation to the reality. That's a mental construct. That's imagination. So Big Bang is a story. It's the best story that we have to explain the universe, but it's a story. I don't know whether this is truth or not. So there's this imaginative part. Now, as a fiction writer also, suppose I have some points, the plot points. I'll come to that later, whether, I think of the plot first or the characters first. That's a different thing. Yeah. So to fill up joining those dots, imagining a sort of a situation or what the character does, it's nothing different. I don't see it, very qualitatively different from what I do as a scientist. So, but yes, I had to overcome a lot of mental barrier that, well, I'm trained as a scientist. Why should I write a novel? What would my colleagues say? What would my peers say, etc., etc. That I had to overcome. And then at some point I said, okay, yeah, I'll write, be whatever it may.
So Sunil, you are a newsroom, native, and this is your second book, which is The Bombay House Heist and Other Forgotten Crime Stories, where you're documenting true crimes. But this is from the early 19th century
This is from the 1870s
to the 70s, 1970s,
1970s,
right?
1970s,
Yeah.
yes.
So what made you commit to it? How did that come?
Well, actually, am I audible? I hope I'm audible. Yeah. So this book is a sequel to my first book, so I'll dwell on that for a minute because I don't think anybody knows about it. So my first book was called Tales of Crimes Past, Case of Crime in Colonial India. So that started from roughly the 1830s to 1947. I'm only interested in colonial India. India post 47 does not interest me at all, and the current India doesn't interest me at all. So my interest in colonial history, I read a lot of colonial history, British Raj. I'm a great fan of the British Raj. I'll get
I think you
brickbats for
should.
that.
Yeah. Closer.
Yeah, okay. So I'm a great fan of the British Raj. I'll get brickbats for that, but that's how it is. So most of my reading has been in colonial India. And I've read innumerable accounts of, police officers, ICS officers. Every ICS officer at that time, more or less, I should say 70-80% of them who were here would write a book, and many of them are extremely, educated, well versed in their subjects. They wrote all the district gazetteers for that matter, every one of them. So anyway, leave that aside. So that's where I sort of got drawn into this crime. So I think when I was in the 8th standard or something, we read about Thuggy, right? Lord William Bentinck abolished it. So I was fascinated by these group of people who actually put that rumal around you, and you know how it is. They waylay travelers. They go in with a bunch of people who are traveling somewhere, and then sit together, and when there's some music happening and there's a dance happening, and then somebody says, I mean, this is how it is fictionally. Somebody claps and says, Tambaku lao, and there's a person behind you who will just whip the towel around you and kill you. So I found that fascinating. So that was when I was in the 8th standard. Later, when I got into journalism and I went to the British Council Library, I read a book by a gentleman called Sir Francis Tucker, the Yellow Scarf. So then, I started reading more and more about Thuggy. I have a great collection of books on Thuggy, rare books from the 1870s. Every single book that's ever written about Thuggy, I'm still fascinated by it. So that's how my interest started. And then when you read all these accounts of all these British officers, you find child murders, kidnappings, cattle rustling, gun running in British India, and poisoning. So those kind of things fascinated me. Now, why did I write the book? The first book, it was a conversation I had with a friend when I was in Reuters. And I was talking to her about my interest in all these things. So she said, Sunil, you have a lot of... I was talking about the criminal tribes, the so-called criminal tribes in India. So when I was telling her some stories, so she said, you know a lot about these things. So I said, yes, I've got a lot of useless knowledge in my head. So she said, no, nothing's useless. You should put it to good use, write a book about it. I said, yeah, maybe someday I'll do it. And then during COVID, while I was at home, I was doing freelance work only. I left Reuters at that time. I had nothing to do. So then I said, yeah, why not sit and write? And my wife encouraged me. And there's a gentleman there by the name of Mr. Vishnu Kamath, who's my great friend, and he's always encouraging me to write. So he said, no, you do it, finish it off. And so that's how I got to writing the book. Now that book, I'll dwell on it briefly, is from the 1830s, as I said, to 1947. That covers some crimes which very few people know about. For instance, in 1870, the Maharaja of the Gaikwar of Baroda, he had to forfeit his throne because he was involved in a poisoning plot. So allegedly, he poisoned the British resident, or not he directly, of course, but the British resident came out from his horse ride, early morning ride, and then he was given a glass of juice, which turned out to be poisoned. He didn't die, of course, but then there was a big hue and cry, and there was an investigation, of course. The Bombay police investigated it, and naturally he went on trial. And he got a lawyer from the UK to fight the trial. And finally, he won the trial, won the case. But unfortunately, because of the circumstances, and the Gaikwar is not very popular with the British at all because he was, in some ways, a nasty fellow. So they actually deposed him. So that was one story which had been. I read the story a long time ago, and I haven't seen it anywhere, printed anywhere. So I thought I'll write about it. Then there was another one, the Maharaja Holkar, Indore. he was enamored of this dancing girl who ran away from him and took up with a guy in Bombay who was a municipal councillor. So that is the Malabar Hill murder. And so then his goons waylaid the car in which they were traveling. And then there was a shootout, and they tried to pull the girl out of the car. And at that time, what happened? 4 British officers happened to come by in a car. So they went in and they rescued the girl. So anyway, it was a big to-do and it was a big mess. Again, the case goes to court. Nothing comes of it because a few people were hanged. 2 people were hanged, 3 or 4 of them acquitted. One of them was acquitted. It was Muhammad Ali Jinnah was his lawyer. And whatever it was, Jinnah was a fantastic lawyer. So he got him out. But the others, 2 of them were hanged and several of them got long terms of imprisonment. But nothing happened to Holkar because he was not directly implicated in it. But nonetheless, he again had to give up his throne for that. So I've covered murders, instances like that, in that. And so that was in 2022, October 2022, the book came out. And then I thought I'll do a sequel. So my idea was to, because I'm from Mumbai, right? And I'm 12 years in Bangalore, but I still say I'm from Mumbai. So I wanted to write a book about crimes in Mumbai. And while the time I was writing my first book, I met this gentleman called Mr. Deepak Rao, who's the historian of the Mumbai police and is also a historian of Mumbai. So he said, Sunil, there are these crimes. Do you know about this? I said, no, I've heard of some of them, but not all. So he said, there are 5 or 6 of these. There must be more crimes. You should write about them. So I started writing out on that. And the book was actually supposed to be a book on Mumbai, crimes in Mumbai. And then I said, okay, I'll do it from the 1870s or whatever, 100 years of crime. And I did get a lot of stories, but I couldn't get a publisher. A couple of publishers looked at it, didn't happen. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it unless I get a publisher. Then, of course, Juggernaut came across and they said, why don't you do this? But then they said, no, you can't have Mumbai throw in stories from all over India. So then I had to scramble a bit. So there are stories from Chennai, there are stories from Bengal. One story from Bengal, which I've put here, is the famous Alokeshi case about the Tarakeshwar Mahant, which was not there in my first book. I was supposed to put in my first book, but I didn't have the time. But a gentleman was very upset that I hadn't, he reviewed me in the Telegraph and he said he's put all the famous cases, but he's not put this Bengal case. So then I said, okay, I'll put that in. And so it was a bit of, frankly, so I just put in about 7 or 8 other cases from all over the country. And that's how I got about writing this book. So it was a conscious, not really a conscious effort in trying to do something, but more of a sequel and more to do with Mumbai. But as it turned out, it's an all-India thing. Which hopefully
it's a treasure trove of those stories, and we'll come to more of them as we go along. Sunil, Biman, your novel is about a truth that is suppressed, kind of a whistleblower's findings buried by powerful institutions. Is it? I believe it's based on a true incident, right?
Well, everybody asks me that, who is this evil scientist that you have, modeled it on? But, well, it's not a single incident. I would say it's a mashup of many such incidents that I have read about and heard about. I have even witnessed some of the cases. One of the triggers, the most important trigger was the suicide of Dr. Binod Shah. This is 1972, and he was an agricultural scientist, very young scientist, and he committed suicide. That became in the national media a prominent news item, and not just that, it became a topic of parliamentary inquiry committee. There was lots of debates in the parliament. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, by the way, gave an impassioned speech on behalf of scientists. What are we? We're not protecting our scientists, etc., etc. But that's a long time. I was a child then, and if you Google Binod Shah's name, you won't find anything. By the way, it's hardly anything there is online.
Has it been suppressed?
No. I wouldn't say that. It's just that it happened a long time ago, and there's newspaper items have not been digitized. So that's all. So, but my father used to keep newspaper clipping. So when I, at at the end of my high school, and I announced that, well, I want to be a scientist. So he brought that out and I said, are you sure you want to be a scientist? He just wanted to, sober me up. But that incident stayed in my mind for a long time. And because at that time it was a national uproar, and so, but it was very difficult to come by the details. So, fortunately, when I contacted his brother-in-law, who was a famous cardiologist in Mumbai, now has passed away. He very generously gave me all the paper cuttings, Marathi, Hindi, English, and the parliamentary committee report, all the speeches. So that was, I have used some of the, for example, parts of the suicide note verbatim in my book. I just wove it in. And the spirit of, what happened to him sort of runs through my book. But that's not just the single incident, by the way. Suppression of truth by powerful institution is not a new story. Okay, it has been happening for a long time. There's this Jonathan Fishbane. If you Google up his name, you would find that his name is, he's called discredited scientist. That's what you call these days the whistleblowers, discredited scientists. You just do this name calling, right? So you just discredit them, and so it's by the powerful lobby. But anyway, Jonathan Fishbane was involved in the development of AZT, of HIV. By the way, HIV is also a retrovirus like coronavirus. So antiviral medicine, and he found that there were toxic effects of AZT, which was being suppressed. FDA had approved, despite all the toxicology report that is foreshadowed in my book. Then there is this Berkeley scientist, Peter Duisberg, who himself at some point said that, I have been made into a ghost because nobody talks to me. He's been totally sidelined. And this is a famous scientist, and he's worked on HIV. He's written several books. By the way, one of his books was forwarded, written by Carey Mullis, the inventor of PCR technique, the RT-PCR. Okay, and those, I've put those names in the book because I have a character who is a journalist and who sort of fills in, gives these informations. So there were several incidents also, in closer to home. Dr. Subhash Mukherjee, arguably the person behind India's first test tube baby, who committed suicide because nobody believed him. And there was a powerful lobby of Bengali intelligentsia and the politicians at that time who went after him, and he committed suicide. Again, it was very difficult to get all the details of his life or of his accounts, but there are accounts by his associates, close associates, which I studied. The Ek Dr. Ki Maut, that was basically based on Subhash Mukherjee, by the way. And so there have been many such incidents. Then during my career, I have witnessed cases where scientists who are sort of non-compromising, forthright, have been sidelined, have been pushed away by powerful lobby. And some of the dialogues in my book are basically taken verbatim from what I've heard from these people. And one of the first person who read my draft was one such person. And he said that, he's passed away before the book came to light. So it's a mashup of many, many such incidents, not just a single incident. But that's what fiction is, right? I mean, I suppose fiction takes elements of reality, and then hopefully it turns into something more than an imaginary construct. It's probably more real than reality, right? I hope so.
How is this received by your colleagues? You writing fiction, and especially this one, The Whistleblower's Wife.
Yeah, I mean, most of my colleagues liked it, I think. At least that's what they said. Some of them are prominent scientists, and I think it has touched, because they've also heard, they've also seen some of these cases. It's not that academia is dark. I don't want to give the picture that
We know that.
Yeah, and I do, I am involved in science popularization. I would like people to come to science, students to come to science. It's not that, but life has all the shades, So, but sometimes we tend to look the other way for our advancing our careers, and I haven't done that. I tried to pry into these stories, and since I have been in the academia for such a long time, I thought if I hadn't written this, it would be unfair for me, as a scientist to write about scientists because, although, you know, hardly any literature about scientists. As if scientists have this stereotypical image that, oh, they're forgetful, they're so impractical, they're oblivious of the daily lives around them, they don't care about people. That's not the case, really. Scientists also have conflicts in their minds. And I wanted to basically study the mind of a scientist, especially a scientist who's going through a turmoil. And just like a scientist would study their object in a laboratory, you'd put things in a test tube and heat things up, right? So I also wanted to put the scientist character in a crucible and heat things up. So when COVID-19 happened, Scroll actually requested, Kanishka Gupta I don't know whether he's here. He asked me to write a review of all the books on COVID-19 for Scroll. So I went through all the books, and then I started thinking, this is the right kind of atmosphere where I can put the scientist and imagine what can happen. But I told you that earlier that it's plot points and joining, but I don't think much about plots, but it's more about characters. So a character sort of emerges in my mind, and I follow the character. I try to see whether he or she, what is she doing, saying to people, and I try to overhear. And something happens. It's about plots. It's about what I've seen in life and the characters as I imagine, and something sort of emerges. Um, but this time also, I made another conscious choice that yes, I wanted to study the mind of a scientist. But then I wanted to see the plight of the scientist in concern, not through his or her eyes, but through somebody else's eyes. So I chose the spouse of the scientist, so that usually we don't think of scientists' spouses. We think at best we can think of them as the woman behind the scientist or the woman behind the success, giving patience and holding the home fort and all that, right? But what about the turmoil going through his or her mind? So I wanted to see the scientist and in a conflicted situation through the eyes of the spouse, and I don't know how it has come out. So that was a challenge that I put up for myself.
It's come out very beautifully because
Thank
I
you.
thought it was a woman writing if I hadn't known that you've written that book.
Oh, that's a compliment.
So, yeah, from her perspective, the story is told. So, very, very interesting. So I'll come. There's a couple of thoughts. We'll come back to that, Biman. Sunil, in your book, you mentioned these are stories that have been forgotten, right? And one of your favorite stories that you talk about is the Rajabai Tower death, and that's a very interesting one. It has like a whole lot of courtroom drama, but it's set in some 1890, I think.
So
Getting that, like, right. So, how was it for you? Why is it your favorite? And how did you go about putting this on paper?
okay, and now the Rajabai clock tower case, very few people know about it, even from Mumbai. So this happened in 1891, and for those of you who know Mumbai, there's the Rajabai clock tower is on the university premises in the fort area. And in 1891, two young ladies, 16, I think one was 16 and the other was 18 years old, who was the wife, one of them was the wife of Ardeshir Godrej, the founder of the Godrej Empire, and the other lady was a sister. So for some reason, they went up the tower, and either they fell or they were pushed or they jumped. Nobody knows. And two of them, yeah, both the ladies. They jumped, fell, or pushed. Nobody knows what happened. And while they were going up the tower, there were a whole procession of people going up and down to visit the tower. In those days, you could go upstairs and look out at the view, look at the sea and all that sort of thing. Nowadays, it's not allowed because when I went there to do my research, there was a lot of restoration work happening. And even now, I'm not sure that they allow anybody. So that was, so finally, a person, again, who was incidentally a Parsi, he was caught for that. And he happened to be in the premises, and somebody pointed it out to him. This gentleman was up there harassing the ladies. And so he was caught and brought to trial. But it didn't come to anything, right? But I found the case very interesting because it's a whodunit, right? I mean, I always wondered who threw those girls from there. What actually happened? Were they assaulted? Did anything happen? So and if you know, there's a lady by the name of Nev Marsh who's written a book on it, Murder in Old Bombay, a fictional book. So I read about that book, but I knew about this case much earlier from my readings in Mumbai history. And I wanted to write about it. But what happened was I couldn't find the papers here either in the archives. They're there in the archives in London, so I don't have access to that. I don't have the resources, frankly, to do that. So then the other obvious thing was to look at the newspapers. And there I was very fortunate because I went to the Asiatic Library in Mumbai, and there, thankfully, the Asiatic Library in Mumbai is a repository of, it's really a great repository of old books or whatever. And thankfully, they have every single issue of the Times of India on microfilm from, if I'm not mistaken, from the 1870s to 1970. After that, they had the paper issue. So there, 1891, all the newspaper accounts. In those days, for those of you who don't know it, crime was covered in great detail. Yeah, and page 3, they would always be on page 3 or page 5. The first page would be advertisements, the others would be on page 3 and page 5. So you would have entire single length columns, 2 columns, 3 columns entirely given to the crime. So, and in those days, justice was very quick. In a lot of cases, I've written about the Dadar triple murder, which was the first triple murder case where a person was hanged, known to be hanged. There might have been others but known to be hanged. That's the case I did. So in those days, cases were done very, in the first day you would find in the paper a report about what happened, somebody murdered or something. In the next 2 days, so-and-so arrested. The third day, the confession or whatever. And the fourth, fifth day, in a week's time, the sessions trial would happen. And somebody would go to the sessions court and the entire transcript, all the witness statements were given. This follows from England, actually. If you see the old papers from England in the 1920s, I'm reading a book, incidentally, about a poisoner, a doctor, a solicitor. Not a doctor, sorry, he was a solicitor, and the first solicitor to be hanged for murder. So his trial went in the 1920s. Again, they carried the whole, they had like 20 journalists. The Manchester Guardian sent 2 people, one to write colored copy to give atmosphere, the other to write the transcripts. Anyway, so I'm digressing. So the entire transcripts were there. So every witness statement, whatever the witness said, all the people who come to court, word for word was written down. So that's how I managed to, I got the papers for about 20 odd days when the trial went. So that's how I managed to get, so I had to actually take a printout. So they're all microfilm. It's quite a tedious process to look at these things on microfilm. So I got all the printouts for that. And, this large double of info size, whatever you call it. And then I had to come home, and my wife is sitting there. I actually had to go through the magnifying glass, and we had to type out the entire thing. And then I went through it. It's a very convoluted case because there were a lot of, while this thing was happening, a lot of people went up and down the tower. And the funny thing at that time was I realized people were very conscious about caste, dress. Almost all the witnesses, even children, they would say, oh, Bengali went up, or a Khoja went up, depending on their dress, or a Chamar went up, or whoever. It's not a nice word to use, but nonetheless. So people would, even in those days, these days, like everybody's invincible, you can't really judge a person from dress. So that I found very fascinating, but that's another part of the story. So all these witness statements I got down, and from that I tried to pierce together what's happened actually, because several people went up, one person went down, and so nobody could actually make any sense of it at the end of the day, which is why this gentleman, the Parsi gentleman called Aslaji Maningji, he was acquitted, and he was actually the son of a very rich man, a billionaire. So people say there was money thrown in, and the investigation, as usual, was shoddy. But very interesting crime. And so one wonders, what happened. So I intended at some point to write a full-length story about it. And that was actually supposed to be my first story in the book. The book was supposed to be, the Rajabai clock tower case and others. So then I hit upon this Bombay heist story, which again, for most of you who don't know it, in 1949, just a year after independence, Bombay House, the headquarters of the Tatas in Mumbai, there was a robbery there. 4 people, where the cash box was being carried out early that morning to the mills where they pay out the salaries. And 4 people came in a car. They stole the judge's car, which again was foolish of them. And so they went in and they robbed the cash box, and which was loaded into the truck, and then they ran away. So then I decided to take that because it was a very short story. Right, and in the Times of India also at that time did not carry the Tata name for some reason. It was Tata Sons at that time. They didn't carry the name. They said only some hold up in Mumbai. And so I decided to use that as my first story. And while we are about it, The book was first supposed to be called The Tata Sons Heist because I thought I'd put the Tata name up there. But then I spoke to a friend of mine, a journalist friend in CNBC, so you don't put Tata because, you never know, there might be a legal issue with it. Though, and because it was not Tata Sons that was robbed, but, so it's Tata Sons is a holding company. So then we went with Bombay House Heist. So, but to answer your question directly, how do I choose these stories? Mostly, more than anything, for access. I mean, am I able to do research on them? I need to, because these are short stories. I thought I'd do short stories. I need to have at least 6,000 words to get 20 pages, right? So, and I need to get enough detail to fill in. So I'll tell you later on how I went about getting those stories. But my thing was, can I get access? Will I have enough detailed data to put in dates, places, names, figures? So that was how I went about it. It was more by accident than by design. So whatever came my way, and there were several stories. There were some I left out because I couldn't actually do the research for them.
Yeah. Also, Sunil, you had so much of research stuff. How did you make it your own? We'll come to that. We'll hold that thought. We'll come to that. How did you make that your own to put it in the story, right? Like, what did you bring to that text? We'll talk about that.
So in my case, what happens is I'm also a book collector. I have about 3,000 books in my house. Most of them are rare books about British India. And I still like to read about. I'm always Googling old Mumbai, crime in Mumbai, and all these books come on archive.org. I print them out and keep them. So how did I adapt them to my kind of writing? Not really. If you see my writing, some people have reviewed it and they said it's not sensational or anything. It's in many ways it's bare
it's
bones, but I've
interesting.
put
It
in a lot.
holds the reader. There is a lot of suspense. There's a lot of
Yeah, but it's very bare bones. It's very detailed. I've given you every name, date, fact. I've checked, double checked. And I'm a person, I don't read much fiction. I need fact. I need the figures. If 6 people were killed, I need to make sure there were 6. I would go to several other sources too. That also comes from my Reuters training, because when we were in Reuters, if there's a bomb blast or something, I was there when the train blasts happen. They will never take anybody's report. 12 people died. They'll say, no, go to the hospital. We will go only by the hospital report. They say 12 people died. They make sure it's 12 people. Or from the police report. But, as we know, newspapers, they all print a lot of wrong information, mistaken information. So that was a problem with me, because in the newspapers, you would find something. And then in some cases, I could access the High Court records online. So there would be a difference. But in many cases, as far as possible, I try to access the court records, because at least one presumes, at least in the court record, the name is right, the spelling is right, and the number of people involved are right. So my process was not more of elimination, trying to stick to the facts. And like I said, I've not tried to sensationalize any story. I've written a very bare bones kind of thing with a lot of facts and figures, because that's what I look. I've looked at story writing in the terms of, would I enjoy reading that story? I'm not really bothered about whether other people like it or not. I would not enjoy reading a story if it was not factually right. Even now, I find a lot of non-fiction writing where the facts are wrong, because I've read them and I know the journalist has not done his homework. So I've done that as much as possible. Hopefully, there's no mistake. But I do a lot of fact checking before I do that. So that's the only thing I apply. That's the only rule I apply, basically.
Biman, you mentioned earlier that there's so many instances, not just one particular instance that was your inspiration to write this novel. Did you ever think of like compiling it as a non-fiction and having each case presented, or did that thought ever come to you, or would you be doing such a thing? So
That's an interesting question. But no, I always thought, I mean, these things, whenever, I come across such events, I make mental notes. But I always thought that, if I ever were to handle these stories, I would do this in the form of fiction. Because, I don't know, I mean, no offense to non-fiction crime writers.
For non-fiction also, you need to do a lot of research. For fiction also, you need to do a lot of
Yes,
research.
yes. Yeah. But what I thought, non-fiction probably caters to the brain, where fiction can reach the heart of a reader. Because, if I can make some characters come alive, then the readers would be able to relate to this. It would have some more, I mean, like multidimensional effect on the reader than to just to compile such. I mean, I do have many such cases. I do have notes, fragments of notes and references and all that. but I think if I've always thought of myself as a storywriter, a storyteller. Um, when it comes to this.
But what was the most challenging part to put this all together? Because it was not one specific case. You were building a story around so many different stories. What was the most
Yeah.
challenging?
Well, I mean, this is one thing, so I don't really like plot-driven stuff. I would like the novel to be more character-driven. So, so as I said, I follow the characters. Some character emerges in my mind, in my imagination, and then I do have some agenda, but you know, I don't want again to be it to be a message-laden book. That it's like full of messages. To make it a story that is going to come alive, to come ring true, and to the second written from the woman's point of view. But then also, I'm going to say something about the academia, uh, to make everything come out in the form of a fictional novel. I mean, this took me more than a decade, by the way, especially the resolution part. That was the most difficult thing. And the setting. So I have been working on this even before COVID-19. So I had a different setting. But then when COVID-19 happened, I realized that this is the setting I wanted. So I rewrote my novel in the setting of COVID-19 and Bangalore, because I could see things happening, you know. And also, at some point, I had to be admitted to ICU. I had dengue. Okay, and well, I mean, that was pretty bad situation, so my friends rushed me to the hospital. My platelet count came down to about 11,000 that night. But the morning when I woke up, I said, "Wow, I'm in ICU, and I need my characters to be in the ICU also. This is my chance to observe what happens in ITU." So. um, so forgot all about my what was happening to me, and my son was with somebody else. I had put him in somebody's place, and I was trying to observe every beep, everything, sight and sound around me, so that I could put things in the so the resolution part, yes. So when in my earlier drafts, it had a more sort of amorphous ending. I wasn't very sure how to end. I want it to be Noah, but not really a Noah, no, like too dark. It would be too dark for people, readers' comfort. But at the same time, I didn't want it to be a happy ending, because I know people with powerful backing can get away. I mean, that happened in the case of Dr. Vinod Shah. I'm not going to name the names, by the way. So what happened to his case, his bosses, is same thing happens here. So that was the difficult part, to come out with the resolution, which you may say that it's not very reassuring. It's not a very happy ending. But what was that famous first line of Naipaul's one of his books? The world is what it is, right? I want the reader to come out with that feeling. That's what the world is, and so that was the most difficult part, I would say. And again, and trying to understand how a woman who is the wife of a scientist sees the scientist and his academic you know circle, from her point of view. And there's a student also, female student, and so that was also very difficult, to get into the mind of a woman. And I tried to do that, because in my first two novels, which were historical novels, I got a lot of flack, saying that people say that your women characters are very marginalized. You haven't given much thoughts to women characters. So I wanted to really understand that. Those are the challenges, I would say. And the scientific part, yes. Whenever I talk to people, see, the scientists are also they can be very uh, non-committable things. So there are scientists who work in big pharma. I have friends, and they didn't like my plot. No, 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 this is not what happens. And then I talked to other people who were the same, ISC setup. They said, yes, that's absolutely, you are on the right track. This is what happened to me. And so then I asked them, okay, so what would happen? What would be the scientific basis of, what could be the scientific basis of this? This is what I would like to happen. And I've taken their help. So to bring all these things, elements in the form of a fiction, those were difficult. And it took me more than a decade. Yeah.
So you were in some remote part of Ladakh recently. You just came back yesterday. What was happening there, and a new book in the offing because of that atmosphere? Did it? I mean, will it be featured in your next book? And what is it about?
Yeah, so I was in Ladakh. I came back yesterday from Leh. I was giving. So the Ladakh has this Astro Week. I was there at the invitation of Ladakh Tourism Department. They're promoting astro-tourism. So they wanted astronomers to go and talk about astronomy to tourists, to people, to monasteries. I was in a monastery day before yesterday talking to lamas. I suppose everything I was absorbing the sight. Oh, it's beautiful. Ladakh is so beautiful. But there's a lot of geological stuff also. If you want to understand the beauty of Ladakh, I think you need to understand the geology, what happened. That's basically the boundary of two plates, by the way, India and the Eurasian plate. And you could see the pain and the groaning of the rocks etched in the colors in front of you. And so the character that is emerging in my mind is is that of a scientist. It's going to be a scientist, but not a geologist. But will probably get interested in geology after going to Ladakh with a geologist friend. So I don't know. I'm trying to follow this character now and see what he or she does. Yeah. Let's see.
Sunil, you are also, besides a collector of books, you also a curio junkie, a passionate. So, any stories brewing there, and what's your next work going to be about?
Uh, well, I'm essentially a book collector. I collect a lot of other things, military medals, badges. I'm interested in railways. I'm interested in the postal department. So all those things actually help me in writing my book because stamps. I have a collection which is like since I was a kid, but I've not added to that.
Military medals, like where do
You get them online on eBay or auctions abroad. So, but police, I have the best probably collection of police military anywhere in India, I should think. I mean, police badges, old ones from the British days. So all that involves history and research. But to answer your question, any anecdote if you want about collecting or something, now I can tell you how long it took me to research a story for this book. So when I was in the Indian Express, 30 years ago? So there was this bookstall called Kokil's bookstore on a place called Banaji Street in the Fort. And he had this collection of rare books, right? So I would go there every weekend. I wouldn't have much money. Our salary was 2,000 rupees a month at that time. I wouldn't have much money. And I would get books from him. So once he gave me this book called The History of the Bombay City Police by S.M. Edwardes, who was himself a policeman. And that book was published in 1928. So there was a very rare copy. He said only two people have that copy. One is Inspector Madhukar Zende, who, if you remember, was the one who got Charles Sobrach, and the other was Mr. Arun Tikekar, who was the Lok Satta editor at that time. So he said, so if you want to take this, a very rare book, you won't get it. So I said, yes, why not? So I got the book, and I went home, and whatever book I immediately start reading, or at least I go through it. So when I read that book, so there is where I found a reference to a crime in 1888. I'm sorry, I'm a little fuzzy about the date, about the Dadar triple murder. So there was only one line about the police commissioner at that time writing, I was involved in the Dadar triple murder, which was quite a case. And also I said, oh, that's all there is. I mean, I wish I could read more about it. And so then I said, I was a member of the Asiatic Library at that time also in Mumbai. So I said, oh, I'll go to the Asiatic one day and look it up. So that never happened. And, time went by, this, that. And so now after 30 years, I've actually, year before last, I actually went down and I actually got got to write about. I went down and I took the date down and I went there. I found the newspaper. It was there. I said, so that's one thing where my collecting interest actually helped me, because if I didn't have that book, I probably wouldn't have. A lot of my stories come from these rare books that I have. So while I was researching, I must tell you that while I was researching this book, where did I get those story ideas from? I had some of those ideas already for the later crimes from the 1960s, 70s, the Bombay house heist, the other robberies, the Lloyd's Bank robbery and all that, this police historian had told me. But while I'm always trawling the net for old stories. So there's this book published, there's no author given, and it's the life and times of Mir Abdul Ali, okay, who was head of the detective branch of the Mumbai police in the 1880s. He and his father, Mir Akbar Ali, they together had a spell of about 40 years in the Bombay police, and they solved a lot of these crimes. So the book was about their lives, and so there were stories about. There were chapters about some of the crimes, that not too much detail, but little bits. So then I wrote down all those dates. I said, okay, I'll try to, and those I got in the newspaper files at the Times of India. Another anecdote, if I can say, not to do with my research, but something fortuitously you find about things after you've written the book. Now, in this book, there's a second story, is the Alavandar murder case, which was very famous in Chennai in the 1952, I think, when it happened. It was very famous because there was this man and his wife who killed the woman's paramour. And they killed him, they lured him to their house and they killed him, and his head was chopped off and put it in the beach, and the body was put in a trunk and kept in the train. Anyway, so all that happened, but they were a very young couple. The guy was 25 years old, the lady was 22 or something, and they served 7 years in jail. And after that, they came back and they went back to Kerala from Palakkad, where they apparently started, not apparently, they started a hotel, and they actually managed to live their lives. They had a good life. I'm also from Palakkad, but I never thought, we are from Palakkad. I mean, I'm from Mumbai essentially, but my people are from Palakkad. So I never thought that there would anybody be still there who probably knew about it. And then when I wrote the book, then I have a cousin calling me last week. He said, Sunil, this guy, one of our uncles knows this guy, and he'd seen him there. And yesterday, I have another journalist friend who actually called me to say, Sunil, I've seen this guy when I was growing up. Because, so these kind of things come up during the course of your research, actually.
But didn't you find any material in the police stations themselves?
No, because you can't go to the police and ask for any files. The Mumbai police historian is a person friend. He said, Sunil, you're not going to get any police files from anywhere. So a lot of these, some of those are from small books which are already written by there's a lawyer called Gauba who's written a lot of books on old crimes. So some of those stories I got from that, I fleshed it out by actually going to the newspaper reports. In some cases, I've actually gone to, I've taken the court records, which are there on indianqanun.org. If you see, if you Google, you'll find a lot of them, not all of them. But so that's how I actually went about getting those cases.
For questions, we would request you to keep the questions short so we can accommodate as many questions possible. You can raise your hand, we'll get you a mic and we can take it from there.
This is to my friend Sunil. Contemporary Mumbai is not contemporary, but late 20th century and the 70s, 80s, 90s, even the 2000s, I think. Mumbai was associated with gangsters rather than individual criminals whom you have covered. So when did actually the gangster culture start in Mumbai?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not very good on those dates, but 80s, 90s, if you see gangsters in Mumbai I remember when I was in, I think it was in the 8th standard, Dawood's aide, Satish Raji, was shot in Chembur on the signal, and we used to get the free press in those days, so that the photograph was there on the front page, all those holes where they actually tried to break it down with a sledgehammer, and they shot him. So, but if you see crime from Mumbai, Vardarajan Mudaliar's days from the 60s, before that, Karim Lala, if you read Hussain Zaidi's book, it actually does justice to that. But while I was growing up in Mumbai, you used to, gangsters were sort of idolized at that time. Everybody says, "Mera ye bhai ke sath pehchan hai mera wo." If you're in college, मैं इसको जानता हूँ, B cabin के लड़कों को जानता हूँ, बोलेगा, they used to say, "अरे उसका उधर पहचान है," So sort of there was a bit of idolizing of these gangsters in those days, in the 80s and the 70s. And from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, while I was in college in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, a lot of this came up actually. A lot of gangs, there was a lot of this encounter thing happening, and a lot of people were shot dead. So, but the gangster thing actually, if you see, organized crime is as old as from the 1940s, from the 1950s, starting from Vardarajan Mudaliar, then Haji Mastan, Karim Lala, then it came down to the Pathan gangsters, Alamzada Nawab Khan. I know when Alamzada Nawab Khan was shot dead in the Baikla High Court, Safaliga went in and, in a naval officer's dress, and he shot him. I still remember the headline that day. So we grew up, and it's all there in my head because, but it's nice, shootouts and all this is nice, but beyond the point, I was never really interested in it. It was college talk, and, at that time, as I said, all these gangsters were idolized. People say, I remember when I was in college, I stayed in a very obscure college in Thana, which is one of the suburbs in Mumbai. But even then, I used to say, there used to be these fights among boys. People say, "Nahi, nahi, uska bhai ke sath pehchan hai." Bhai is Daud Bhai in Bike Club, and he had run away before. So growing up in Bombay, you grow into more of this. You heard a lot of this gangster culture in those days, which is gone now. I think there are none of them left. But while it was very fascinating, exciting, I never really was too much into this. My interest was always pre-gangster era and the lesser known. Then, of course, the other crime that I remember when we were children was this Billaranga case, which happened in Mumbai. Oh my God, I think I was 6th or 7th standard. And it's very unfortunate that the lady, the girl's name is Deepa, the Chopras, the two kids, the girl was unfortunately raped and murdered. And Billaranga were caught. But, Billaranga were absconding for some time. And then there was this thing, Billaranga, and then somebody I remember told me, no, he's been spotted somewhere near where we were staying. So that was something which, something I remember about. So growing up in those days, gangsters is, as you said, from the 70s, 80s era, that's what when they started. And before that, but what I remember is Billaranga very much. Though, of course, they were from Delhi. But growing up, Billaranga is a memory. Then, of course, Charles Sobraj, when Charles Sobraj was captured, he was actually in that in the Taj Hotel, I think, or in the Oberoi, poisoning all those tourists. And then, of course, he was caught in Goa. So that was it. I don't know if it answers your question, but...
My question to both authors. How do you make your pitch to the publishing houses? Juggernaut is my publisher as well. Do you have your draft all fleshed out, or how do you reach out, especially when it's non-fiction?
So first, so he's asked, how did I pitch my book, right? Now, I can tell you this as a writer that the writing is the easy part, right? But getting a publisher is very, very difficult. It's very difficult unless you know people. Even if you know people, it doesn't happen. In my case, I wrote my book about, my first book, I wrote about 6 or 7 stories, and then I said, hey, what's the point? I don't know if I'll get a publisher. But then a common friend who's written a book put me in touch with Kanishka Gupta, who's a big-time agent now, of course. And Kanishka, I called him up, and he was very nice. He said, no, Sunil, send me your story ideas. And then he liked it. He said, no, don't worry, I'll get you a publisher. It's a nice book. And then 3 months go. I never heard from him. And suddenly he calls up and said, Sunil, we have got something with Hatchet. And so that's how it happened. I was very fortunate, but I know people I've also sent lots of manuscripts to people, but you never get a reply. I don't blame them because it's not easy. Coming very quickly to my second book, when I wrote the first book, my publisher, they said, Sunil, if you have a sequel to it, we'll do it. So I gave them about 8 or 9 stories, but then they said, no, the marketing department, I understand, has a lot of say in what actually gets published, if I'm not mistaken. That's how I understand it. So they said, no, we are not sure whether this will sell. So then the lady there who was a publisher had moved on to another big publisher, and she said, Sunil, I'll take a look at it, and you send me your manuscript. So I sent the manuscript. It took another year. Nothing came of it. And then I said, forget it. So I'd written about 6 stories of this, and I said, I'm not going to touch it unless I get a publisher. But thankfully, I've been blessed with some friends who always help me out. So another friend who's a CNBC, senior person at CNBC, I won't take his name. So he's published a book, and he was approached to write a sequel for the book. So he said, no, I'm not doing anything, but Sunil Nair is there. Why don't you talk to him? So Juggernaut called me, and then they liked the story. So I frankly had an easy run, but for all budding authors, aspiring authors sitting here, it's not easy, but keep at it. keep at it, because someday you will get lucky, but it's very difficult. Writing part is easy. But at the end of the day, I will still tell you that if you need to write the book, just sit down and write that damn book, because unless you write it, it's not going anywhere. We all dream, right? Someday I'll be a great author, and people will call me for interviews, and I'll get the book. All that will happen, but first you need to get down, sit down, write the book. My wife is sitting there. She used to tell me I used to sit down at 9:30, 10 in the morning, and I'll be sitting there till 3 in the morning typing away, because when you like doing that, your work becomes leisure. But you need to sit down. It's not easy. It's very, very, very hard work. I'm not saying. I'm sure Biman will agree with me. It's very hard work. You need to sit down. Putting down 70,000 words is not easy. I've got one manuscript half completed, 30,000 words. My friend sitting there is always calling me every week. Why don't you finish it up? Why don't you finish it? It's not easy. So to answer your question, if you want to write a book, if any of you intend to write a book, start out when you're young. I'm in my 50s. I wish I started in my 30s, because it's going to take a lot of time, and not all of you are going to make it. But nonetheless, if you want to write a book, to answer your question, if you've not started now, start now, go home, start writing. It'll take a long time. It'll take a very long time. You have to be exceptionally lucky also. And again, if you write the book, it's not that it's going to sell. Please don't think it's going to sell and you're going to make $1 million overnight. Doesn't happen. It's a big struggle. You have to do a lot of PR work, which doesn't come easily to me. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram. I got on Instagram only 2 weeks ago, because my daughter said, Daddy, you have to be on Instagram. I don't know how to handle the smartphone. She did the whole thing for me. It's a lot of hard work. Publishing, writing, a lot of hard work. It's not easy for the publishers as well, I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, for a fiction writer, if you're not a celebrated writer, you have to have the whole manuscript, and then try your luck.